3 seconds of silence. The camera is fixed on the cold steps of a church on a nearly empty street. There's an old wooden door with a discreet cross above it. There are marks on the floor, fine scratches, as if something had passed there with difficulty, and a trail of mud mixed with dust right where the light from inside escapes from under the door. A distant bell rings in the wind, without music, just a metallic sound and a heavy air. It's not possible. Someone whispers, almost voiceless. Pause. The door doesn't open, and no one yet understands why that door, exactly that one, has become the center of everything. Daniel always thought he knew the neighborhood. He'd been a police officer for years, used to danger small and large, but lately what weighed on him wasn't the street, it was his heart, the long shift, the exhaustion, and the house silent since his family separated. In the back of the patrol car, the K9. Rex, one German shepherd. He breathed softly, attentive, as if sniffing out the whole world. Daniel called Rex "my puppy loyal" and tried to smile because the loyalty. The dog's place was the only one where trust still seemed simple. But that morning the air felt different, as if the neighborhood was hiding something. Before the round ended, Daniel saw a killed near the sidewalk, alone, hugging a backpack bigger than herself. Sophia had the eyes of someone who had learned to be afraid without making a sound. She didn't cry, but held back the tears as if they were a secret. Daniel slowed his pace, his voice calm, trying not to scare her. "Hey, are you okay?" She looked at the ground, then at the church in the distance, and tightened his backpack again. Rex, the police dog, he wasn't barking. He just stared towards the door, as if familiar, as if someone were hiding behind that piece of wood. If you like stories about rescue, of love and a puppy hero, leave your like, activate the bell and follow the page. Because what starts here seems small, but becomes something breathtaking. Daniel tried to take Sophia to a safe place, as any police officer would, but she took a step back and whispered, "No, there won't be time." The sentence was short, human, and brought a different kind of chill. Rex approached slowly, without touching her, just sniffing the air, as if searching for a clue that no one else could see. Daniel realized that normality had ended, but he still didn't know where. The street continued as usual, people passing by, a bicycle creaking, a garage door closing, and yet Rex began to act strangely in a subtle way. He would stop, take 2 steps back, look at Daniel, then at the church, as if asking permission. Daniel thought it was the wind or the smell of the neighborhood, but there was a detail. Rex was injured, his body heavy and his breathing irregular, and yet he seemed pulled by something greater than pain. Sophia didn't take her eyes off the specific door, as if she knew the ending before the beginning. Nobody around noticed, and that's what's frightening. When the danger it arrives silently, it almost always arrives first, in the form of instinct. Rex took 2 steps forward and stopped, as if the ground had become heavier beneath his paws. Police dog took a deep breath, a breathing short and irregular, and lowered his head, toss-sniffed the air. There was a metallic smell mixed with old wood and stale incense, something that didn't belong in the street. Daniel noticed the slight tremor in the body of German Shepherd, and he felt a tightness in his chest. Rex never made a mistake like that. Child. She watched in silence, clutching her backpack as if it were a shield. Church. It seemed motionless, but the light under the door pulsed in a strange, almost imperceptible way. Daniel tried to gently pull Rex away, his voice low, as if speaking to a tired friend. Puppy, he resisted without aggression, merely steadying his body, protecting the space between himself and the door. There was loyalty in that gesture, but also in the urgency. The policeman noticed marks on the ground, recent scratches, as if someone had been dragged there. The air grew heavy, and Daniel sensed that something was out of place. Sophia took a step back, her eyes welling with tears, and whispered, He knows. She didn't explain what. Rex looked up, his gaze fixed, pleading, trust, not orders. Time seemed to slow down. People passed by without noticing anything, and this increased the discomfort. Rex tried to move forward, but his body failed him. The injured dog, he fell to the side without barking, only with a short whimper. Daniel ran to catch him, feeling the strength of the lover that is born when a partner falls. The puppy, she dragged herself a few centimeters, her nails scraping against the cement, always in the same direction, the specific door of church. A child, she began to cry silently. Tears restrained, as if she knew that effort came at too high a price. Daniel called for backup over the radio, but kept his voice calm so as not to break the moment. Rex was breathing with difficulty, still trying. Protect the space ahead. The K9 police dog, he tapped the door with his snout, leaving a dark mark of mud, and looked back at Daniel. There was no barking, no spectacle, only silence and an unsettling certainty. The police officer thought about protocols, the hospital, calling an ambulance, but something prevented him from taking Rex away from there. Her faith, she wasn't religious at that moment. It was faith in the instinct that had saved lives before. Sophia finally spoke, her voice almost fading. My mother went in there. The word mother, it fell like a weight. Daniel looked at the child. Then to Rex, he felt the story taking shape without complete explanation. The puppy, he tried to stand up again, failed. And yet he moved forward a few more inches, as if each movement were a plea for rescue. The wind carried the scent of church with more force. Daniel noticed a detail that no one else had seen. A crumpled envelope stuck to the base of the door, partially hidden, like a forgotten piece of evidence. The support had not yet arrived. Daniel knelt, his hand firmly on the back of his German shepherd, and made a silent decision. He wouldn't take Rex away from there before he understood. Hero dog. She closed her eyes for a second, then opened them, focused, as if to say there was still time. Child. He held the policeman's sleeve, searching. Hope. The door remained closed, but something on the other side seemed to respond to Rex's effort. A faint sound, almost nothing, and in that instant, Daniel knew that the worst mistake would be to ignore that signal. Rex gathered his strength like someone holding on to the last thread of hope. The puppy, he rested his chest on the cold ground and returned toss-sniff slow, persistent, as if the air carried a story trapped there. Daniel noticed the detail. Every time the wind changed, the German shepherd, he reacted differently, turning his snout towards the base of the door. Church, it wasn't noise, it wasn't visible movement. It was a smell that mixed old-fashioned cleanliness with something recent, almost human. Child, he tightened his grip on his backpack and took a short breath, and Daniel realized that silence, it wasn't empty. It was a warning. The police officer asked people to move away without making a fuss. No one argued. The atmosphere made everyone obey. Rex tried to get up, failed again, and dragged himself a few more inches, leaving clear marks on the ground. Injured dog, it didn't bark, it didn't cry. It just kept going. Daniel felt the weight of trust, what was required at that moment, to trust a wounded instinct against the comfort of the rules. Canine, a police dog, he touched the wood with his snout again and stopped, as if he had reached his limit. The light below the door flickered. He didn't open it, but he answered. Sophia began to tremble. Child. She seemed to be fighting back tears, and that broke something inside Daniel. He always protects, she said, without explaining who. Rex turned his head toward her, his gaze calm. Leal, and turned back to face the door. The love, it wasn't noisy there, it was steady. Daniel noticed a muffled sound, almost a breathing weak on the other side. It could be plumbing, it could be nothing. But Rex reacted with silent urgency, nudging the wood with his snout. The policeman felt the danger, the risk of making mistakes, and the greater risk of ignoring them. The radio crackled with confirmation of the support on its way. Daniel took a deep breath, trying to buy time without breaking the moment. Rex closed his eyes for a second, as if gathering strength, and returned to sniff the lower gap. The puppy. He was exhausted, but he was still protecting that exact spot. A church, it seemed bigger now, heavier, guarding something it didn't want to be seen. Achilled, he gripped Daniel's hand tightly. He realized that this gesture demanded more than physical security. It demanded courage. The door remained closed, and that made everything more urgent. A gust of wind brought the scent back again, stronger, and Rex reacted with a short, almost imperceptible movement. Daniel followed its gaze. German Shepherd, even the crumpled envelope at the base of the door. Touching the paper, he felt it was warm, as if it had been placed there recently. There was no name visible, only a simple symbol drawn in pen. Rex watched everything attentively, trusting the hero dog. There was no need to explain. He showed it. "Child," he murmured a short prayer, more out of instinct than rehearsed faith. As the sirens drew closer, Rex let out a long sigh and lowered his head, finally succumbing to exhaustion. Daniel knelt beside the puppy, a firm hand, silently promising not to leave. Loyalty, he had guided each step to that specific door, and now demanded a human response. Silence, it became dense, almost respectful. A Gurchit no longer seemed like a common scenario. It was a boundary between what is ignored and what is confronted. And at that point, Daniel understood. The worst was yet to come. The reinforcements arrived with hurried steps and cautious glances. A paramedic assessed the injured dog, taking notes on vital signs, while Daniel explained what he had seen. Or rather, what Rexit made sense. Some police officers exchanged glances. Someone murmured that the police dog-it could be confusing smells, which Church-it had decades of history and old smells. Daniel listened, but kept his hand on the back of the German Shepherd, feeling the breathing, irregular deceleration. Achild stayed to the side, insolence, as if any word could break something fragile. Doubt grew. Follow protocol or trust no instinct. A supervisor urged caution. Without clear signs, we don't force a door open. The sentence landed heavily on his face. Rex opened his eyes and went back to sniff, insistent, focusing on the lower gap. The puppy, he wasn't barking, he was pointing. Daniel noticed the envelope again and tried to explain the clue, but the reaction was lukewarm. Someone suggested that the child was confused, that the mother, perhaps he had gone away. Sophia heard and shook her head, tears contained. The love-it was palpable there, but institutional reasoning demanded proof. The danger, the risk of making a mistake seemed greater than the risk of waiting. While they were discussing, Daniel noticed another detail. The bell of church. He was standing still, but a faint echo vibrated inside, irregular, like an object touching wood. Rex reacted with a short, protective movement, positioning his body between the door and the child. A loyalty-due hero dog, it seemed to say that someone needed to be protected now. The paramedic warned that Rex needed immediate attention. Daniel felt the conflict tearing inside. Save his partner right there or take him away. The decision wasn't technical. It was human, and time, indifferent, kept passing. The supervisor insisted on the procedure again. Daniel took a deep breath, remembering other times when Rex had been right, when everyone else doubted him. Canine police dog. She raised her head, fixed her gaze on the door, and then on Daniel, as if asking for a choice. Child. She grabbed the policeman's sleeve, whispering, "Please." It wasn't an order, it was hope. Daniel realized that if he was wrong, he would face the consequences, but if you were right and backed down, the cost would be greater. Faith. At that moment, it wasn't blind faith, it was a decision. Daniel asked for 5 minutes, just 5. He authorized the paramedic to stabilize Rex right there and requested a minimal check around the door. The atmosphere became tense. Some agreed, others disagreed. Rex remained alert, trusting, as if recognizing the gesture. The puppy, he didn't need to win the argument. He needed to buy time. Church, she remained silent, keeping her secret. And when Daniel approached the keyhole to get a better look, he noticed something no one else had seen, a detail too small to be a coincidence. It was then that doubt began to give way to truth. Daniel approached the door cautiously, as if each step could awaken something dormant. The old wood was cold to the touch, but the base bore recent marks, parallel scratches, almost invisible to anyone not looking. Rex reacted immediately, the police dog stretching my neck despite the pain, sniffing with insistence on that exact spot. The silence. It became even more difficult when Daniel noticed a slight unevenness in the doorframe, something out of the ordinary. It wasn't brute force, it was recent wear and tear. "Puppy," he groaned softly, not in pain, but as a warning, as if pleading that they not ignore that detail. One of the police officers commented that the church had been undergoing renovations for months, trying to explain the wear and tear. Daniel listened, but something didn't add up. The scent Rex was following wasn't old. It was fresh, human, mixed with fear. Achilled, she watched everything with her body hunched over, hugging her backpack as if it were her last anchor. Sophia pointed to the door and said, almost voicelessly, that the mother he had entered quickly, like someone running away. The comment caused discomfort. Some adults looked away. Danger. Now it wasn't just a physical issue, it was the possibility that they had been wrong before. Rex tried to move again and needed the paramedics' assistance. Even injured, the German shepherd, he remained focused, his eyes fixed on the lower crack. Daniel felt a lump in his throat as he saw the loyalty do hero, dog pushing the body to its limits. The paramedic warned that time was running out for Rex. The decision became even more difficult. To take the puppy, now it meant abandoning the investigation. Staying meant risking the partner's life. Trust the demand at that moment didn't come from the manuals, it came from the shared history between man and dog. The supervisor authorized a minimal inspection without forcing entry. Daniel bent down, flashlight in hand, and illuminated the base of the door. The beam revealed something hidden beneath the wood. Thin, almost invisible wires running underneath, connected to a small metallic object attached to the inside side. Rex reacted immediately, his body tense, breathing accelerated. The canine police dog. He didn't growl. He merely fixed his gaze, as if confirming a long-held suspicion. Thessalence. It turned into pure tension. Church. It ceased to be a symbol and became proof. The discussion resumed, now quieter, more serious. It was no longer exaggerated instinct. It was an indication. Achilled, she started to cry. Tears silent, and Daniel realized that every second of delay could cost more than they imagined. Rex relaxed slightly when Daniel touched his head, as if he understood that they were finally listening. Love. There, it wasn't about emotion. It was about responsibility. The door remained closed, but now everyone knew something on the other side needed to be found, and the mistake would no longer be to act. It would be to wait. Daniel gestured for silence. The flashlight returned to the crack, now following the wires that disappeared under the door. The police dog raised its snout and sniffed again, reacting when Daniel brought the beam close to the small metallic object. There was no audible alarm, but the air seemed to vibrate. The German shepherd, he tensed his body, protecting the child with his own stance even when injured. The silence, it thickened, and someone commented that it didn't seem like part of any renovation. Daniel felt the trust it grew, not out of courage, but because doubt was beginning to give way to evidence. The supervisor requested visual confirmation before any further action. Daniel walked around the door, examining the frame, and found recent marks of removal and replacement. Hasty work. Rex reacted with a short movement as if to say, "Here, Puppy. She was breathing heavily, but she didn't look away. Cratchit seemed to be hiding something improvised, not old. Achilde murmured the name of Mother, and the sound swept through the group like a plea. Daniel realized it wasn't just an inspection, it was a moral choice between waiting for absolute certainty or acting to protect now. The team began to disagree in whispers. Some advocated evacuating and calling in specialists. Others feared that any delay would increase the risk. Danger Rex closed his eyes for a moment and returned Tosniff, persistent, focused on the same line. The hero dog. He didn't need to convince anyone. He stuck to his point. Daniel remembered other instances where the instinct of K9 saved family whole. The love there, it wasn't about sentimentality. It was about shared responsibility. Cratchit remained silent, but the metallic detail seemed to respond to the passing of time. Daniel asked for permission for a simple thermal check without opening the door. When the display lit up, the contrast showed something irregular just behind the wood. Low, intermittent human heat. Rex reacted immediately, his body tense, loyalty intact. Achilde. She started crying for real. Tears. They were free, and no one tried to silence her. The fact changed the tone of the conversation. It was no longer a distant hypothesis. There was someone there. Doubt still existed, but now it walked alongside a fact that demanded responsible and swift action, without spectacle, without error. The supervisor took a deep breath and nodded, authorizing the transition to the next phase of the protocol. Daniel kept his hand on the back of his puppy, promising in a low voice that she would stay with him. Rex relaxed a little, as if he understood. Cratchit remained closed, but it no longer held only mystery, it held a truth about to be revealed. Thesalence. The end of that block wasn't empty, it was preparation. Everyone knew that the next step would change everything. And at that moment, no one doubted why Rex had chosen that particular door. Daniel gestured for everyone to step back a few paces. There was no loud counting, no theatrical haste, just silence. The right tool struck the wood at the point indicated by the marks, and a short, dry sound echoed. Rex raised his head instantly, breathing, restrained, eyes fixed. The door gave way just enough to reveal the dark interior and a strong, human, recent scent. The flashlight scanned the floor and found the object a metal mechanism connected to wires. A simple, improvised mechanism attached to the door frame. Nothing exploded, nothing fell. But the air changed. Cratchit wasn't a shelter, it was a hiding place. The light moved a little further and revealed a body leaning against the side wall, motionless. A murmur swept through the group. Daniel entered first, slowly, keeping his flashlight low. The woman was breathing weakly and irregularly. It was her, Mother Sophia's. The puppy reacted with a minimal movement, almost a sigh of relief, as if the loyalty had completed the first part of the journey. Achilde. She tried to run, but was carefully restrained. The moment called for calm, danger. It still existed, silent, trapped in the makeshift mechanism, but now there was a clear focus to save. The paramedic approached, assessing vital signs while Daniel maintained a safe space. The woman showed signs of dehydration and exhaustion, with old restraint marks on her wrists. Nothing graphic, nothing exaggerated. Just enough to understand that it wasn't an accident. Rex remained attentive, protected the perimeter, even injured, positioning the body between the team and the mechanism. The canine police dog, he didn't growl, he observed. Love, he appeared to be in control there. Church, he revealed his truth little by little, without haste, as if demanding respect for the moment. Daniel noticed an additional detail under the side seat. A cracked, switched-off cell phone and an envelope identical to the one found outside. The pieces were falling into place. It wasn't blind faith, nor chance. It was an improvised method, simple coercion, someone using the location to avoid raising suspicion. Rex returned to sniff the floor, confirming the short path to the door. The hero dog. She had followed the right trail despite the pain. Trust what she had asked for before was now justified. The climax wasn't a scream. It was the silent realization that listening to her instincts had saved a life. When the stretcher came in, Sophia was able to touch the hand of Mother for a second. There were no speeches. Just tears restrained and a weak nod. Rex closed his eyes, exhausted, and Daniel remained by his side, his hand steady, as promised. A church it became just a building again, but that particular door would forever carry the weight of what it had revealed. Silence. What followed was not emptiness, it was respect. And in that instant, everyone understood. The puppy, he didn't choose a symbol. He chose the only place where the truth could still be found. The team carefully isolated the makeshift mechanism, touching it only when necessary. Daniel kept the flashlight low, illuminating only what needed to be seen. Rex followed every movement with a fixed gaze. Breathing controlled, as if driving insolence, the police dog wasn't progressing. He protected the space with the body, even wounded. The recent human scent still lingered, confirming the danger. A church it seemed smaller inside, hindering decision-making. Sophia watched from a distance, her hands trembling, trusting without understanding. A loyalty. There, it wasn't a spectacle. It was patient vigilance, sustaining the moment. Daniel noticed a detail in the mechanism, reused wires, poorly placed insulation, evident haste. It wasn't the work of a specialist, it was the improvisation of someone afraid of being seen. Rex sniffed. He looked at the ground and confirmed the short path to the side bench, then turned back to face the door, as if to say that the path began and ended there. German Shepherd. He closed his eyes for a second, exhausted, and opened them again, alert. The woman on the stretcher was breathing better with the oxygen. Child, she let out a short cry. Tears. Things were heating up, and Daniel realized that each clue now needed to be read carefully. The supervisor authorized the neutralization of the mechanism. There was no applause, just a dry, almost imperceptible click. The silence. What followed was serious and respectful. Rex relaxed his posture, as if recognizing that the immediate danger had passed. Puppy, he rested his chin on the cold floor, still trusting, still alert. Daniel felt the weight lift from his shoulders without becoming complete relief. There were consequences to deal with. The envelope found under the seat contained simple notes, dates, times, nothing dramatic. All sufficient. A church, he returned the evidence without speeches. While the team documented the location, Daniel stayed with Rex, his hand firmly on his back. Hero dog. She was breathing better, but the fatigue was visible. A loyalty, it had been expensive. Sophia approached slowly and touched the fur of Puppy's small gesture, lover restrained. Rex opened his eyes and remained calm, as if accepting the thanks without asking for anything. Thessalence. Between them, it spoke louder than words. The specific door was now open, but the mystery persisted in another form. For how long had that truth remained hidden there? Daniel mentally reviewed each decision. If he had followed only protocol, he would have taken Rex away sooner. If he had ignored the trust instinctively, I would have left the mother there for longer. The canine police dog, he raised his head when he heard footsteps outside, alert once more. The work was not finished. A church it ceased to be a backdrop and became living proof of how small signs can change destinies. The climax didn't explode, it settled. And in that silent settling, everyone understood why Rex had chosen that particular door. The ambulance was waiting outside, but Daniel asked for a few more minutes. The scene still needed to be fully understood. Puppy raised its snout and sniffed. The air was blown again, confirming that there was no longer any immediate risk. The German shepherd, he remained near the door, as if that spot still demanded respect. At church, she, previously silent out of carelessness, now seemed silent by choice. Sophia observed everything with attentive eyes, child trying to understand how the instinct of a police dog, she had seen what so many adults hadn't seen. The truth didn't shout. It remained there, breathing slowly. Daniel carefully picked up the second envelope. Inside there was only a short note, hastily written, mentioning fear, vigilance, and a request to wait until dark. It didn't explain everything, but it explained enough. Rex reacted to the paper with a slight nod, as if confirming the connection. Hero dog, he didn't need to read. He already knew. A loyalty. He had followed the scent of panic, not guilt, church. She was not chosen out of faith, but out of invisibility. And it was precisely there that instinct broke through the hiding place. The paramedic announced that the woman was stable. The word brought a restrained relief. Sophia let out a long sigh, as if holding back her breath. Breathing, it had been a long time. Daniel felt the weight of the moment fall on his shoulders, but he didn't move. The puppy, he was exhausted, but he stayed awake, his eyes alert, trust intact. The team began collecting evidence, photographing details, measuring distances. All technical, all necessary, but the emotional core remained in the same place, the exact spot where Rex had stopped first. Daniel knelt beside the canine police dog, bringing his face close to his. "You were right," he said in a low voice, without an audience. Rex didn't react with euphoria, he just blinked slowly. The love life there was simple and mature, with no promise of reward. Church, it no longer held any mystery, it held only memory. The specific door remained open, creaking slightly in the wind, as if reminding everyone that not all danger is announced. Some simply wait to be recognized by those who know how to look. When the stretcher was removed, the team followed along. Silence. There was no celebration. The climax ended as it began, restrained, humane. Rex was carefully placed in the support vehicle, covered by a blanket. Loyalty. He had overcome the pain and fulfilled his purpose. Daniel stayed behind, looking at the door one last time. He knew that from then on, he would never again ignore a sign that was too small. Because on that day, a puppy, the injury showed that the truth doesn't run away. It waits until someone has the courage to trust. Rex was taken for treatment with extreme care, the blanket covering his tired body as the ambulance slowly drove away. Daniel watched until the very last second, feeling the loyalty still pulsing in that silent gesture. Exaggeration was left behind, now surrounded by tape and discreet lights, without curious onlookers, without noise. Sophia sat on the ambulance seat, her hands trembling, but her face lighter. Achilde breathed easier, knowing that, mother, she was alive. The puppy, he wasn't there to see it, but his presence still protected everyone, like a steady echo of trust. At the hospital, doctors confirmed that Rex would need a simple surgery, nothing heroic in the eyes of those expecting a spectacle. Daniel heard insolence, nodding, feeling the weight slowly lift. The canine police dog, the ordeal had gone beyond the physical realm, and now she needed rest. The rescued woman was taken for examinations. She was still weak but conscious. When she asked about her daughter, Daniel calmly replied, explaining that Sophia was safe. Tears. They came there discreetly, without drama. A salvation, it wasn't a single grand moment. It was a series of correct decisions that prevented something worse from happening. The supervisor called Daniel in for a chat. There was no reprimand, just a silent acknowledgement that trusting his instincts was the answer. Puppy, it had avoided irreversible consequences. The report was objective and technical, as required by procedure. But it contained something implicit. The hero dog had been decisive. Daniel signed the papers with a firm hand, thinking about how many times the faith in the obvious, subtle signs are erased. A church was now part of a process, not a mystery. And Rex, even in his absence, remained present in every detail that led to the truth. Sophia believes in the landmother that same night, for just a few minutes. There were no long hugs, only hands that met, and a look that said, "We're here." Child, he spoke of Puppy. She recounted how he didn't give up, how he dragged himself to the door. The woman closed her eyes, moved, as if understanding that protection, sometimes it comes from where you least expect it. Daniel watched from a distance, respecting the moment. The love there, he didn't need witnesses. He supported himself, finally in peace provisional. When Daniel returned to the veterinary hospital, he found Rex awake, still groggy, but alert. German Shepherd wagged its tail slowly upon recognizing the familiar voice. Daniel sat down beside it, unhurriedly, letting the silence, he did the rest. There were no medals, no speeches, just the certainty that lives had been protected because someone decided to trust the consequence wasn't fame, it was learning. And in that simple room, Daniel understood that loyalty of a puppy, it doesn't change the whole world. It changes exactly what needs to be saved. In the following days, the investigation progressed calmly. The evidence gathered in church, they revealed a simple scheme of coercion. Someone had exploited fear and isolation to keep the woman hidden, away from family, without raising suspicion. Nothing sophisticated, just cruel enough to work. Daniel followed the developments from a distance, knowing that the decisive role had already been played. The puppy, I didn't need to understand reports to know I had done the right thing. A loyalty Rex had broken a silent chain of danger, and that was a concrete consequence, not a pretty narrative. Rex was recovering well. The veterinarian explained that the extreme exertion had aggravated an old injury, something anyone else would have ignored. German Shepherd, he had heard his body asking for a pause, but he had chosen to continue. Daniel felt a mixture of pride and guilt. Canine police dog, he didn't speak, but his gaze said there was no regret. The love there, it wasn't dependence, it was partnership. Daniel began visiting him daily, sitting beside the kennel, letting the silence. He rebuilt the rhythm between them, a slower, more attentive rhythm. Sophia returned to school a few days later. Killed, he carried less fear in his body, although he still looked at the doors cautiously. When he told the story, he didn't talk about the police or reports. He talked about Puppy who did not give up. The teacher listened respectfully without turning it into a spectacle. A trust the girl's story had not been returned by the world, but by a persistent gesture of protection. A mother, while recovering, he wrote a short letter, thanking the dog who saw what I couldn't say. Daniel kept the paper in silence. The supervisor officially announced that Rex would be removed from street duty for an extended period. It wasn't punishment. It was a precaution. Daniel accepted without question. The practical consequence was clear. Less action, more presence. Hero dog, he would then train others, observing more than running. A faith. The instinct hasn't diminished, it has merely changed form. A church it reopened weeks later, without signs, without public curiosity. Those who passed by couldn't imagine what had happened there, and that seemed right. Some truths don't need a stage, they need rest. On a quiet afternoon, Daniel took Rex to see Sophia and the mother. The encounter was brief and respectful. Rex remained calm, lying down, receiving affection with dignity. Loyalty, there it transformed into peace. A child, he smiled without tears, and the woman thanked him again, without grand words. Daniel realized that the ultimate consequence wasn't in the processes, but in how everyone could breathe easier. The puppy. He closed his eyes to the sun. finally without urgency. And Daniel understood that saving lives isn't always about rushing. Sometimes it's about knowing when to stop. The final report was closed without fanfare. Dates, times, decisions. Nothing there reflected what really happened. Daniel read and signed, aware that the paper never truly reaches the heart of the world, silence of making the right choice. A church. He returned to his routine, and the specific door received only a discreet repair without any visible mark. Rex, still recovering, accompanied Daniel to the exit of the veterinary hospital, taking short steps, trust intact. The puppy. He didn't seem to seek recognition. He seemed satisfied to have protected what needed protecting. The practical consequence was simple. Lives went on, and that was enough. A Mother Sophia was discharged weeks later. She returned home cautiously, learning to trust the little details again. She began to sleep better, without waking up with a start. Daniel visited them one last time to deliver recovered belongings. There were no long speeches, only restrained gratitude, love serene. Rex remained in the car, resting, as if he understood that this closure did not require physical presence. A loyalty, he had already done the essentials. Sometimes saving someone means knowing when to stay out of the picture. Rex was officially transferred to internal duties. He would train new trainers, police dogs observing more than running. Daniel accepted the change as part of the journey. The German Shepherd, he adapted quickly, attentively, patiently. The instinct remained alive, just applied in a different way. A faith, what he represented, didn't diminish. It matured. The consequence of that day wasn't a trophy. It was a lesson that spread throughout the team. Listening to subtle signals prevents late decisions. And that's not something you read in manuals, but it saves lives. On a typical afternoon, Daniel walked down the street again. Church. The door was open, a faint light streaming in. He paused for a moment, took a deep breath, and continued. There was no more tension there, only memory. Silence. It wasn't a warning. It was peace. Rex waited calmly in the car, hero dog. There was no need to revisit the past. It had already served its purpose. The true consequence was evident in that unhurried walk, like someone who trusts in the present. Daniel returned home with Rex by his side. He prepared the food, sat on the floor, and stayed there for a few minutes without thinking about the next shift, love. Between them, words weren't needed. A loyalty. He had overcome the pain and transformed it into a safe routine. Salvation at last was complete when the world resumed its right rhythm. And that late afternoon, Daniel knew. Some stories don't end with applause. They end when everyone can breathe again. Sometimes the truth doesn't shout, it waits. It waits for someone willing to trust when everything seems to call for retreat. Rex didn't choose one. Church be faith. He chose because through excellence it was hiding a cry for help. And Daniel learned that loyalty, it's not about blindly obeying rules, but about listening to the right signals at the right time. If this story touched you, leave a little paw. Leave a comment and share with anyone who believes that heroes don't always speak. Sometimes they just remain.